Why do INFJs make for such reluctant leaders of people, if not people who avoid leading altogether, who are uncomfortable with this notion? So they may seek to avoid being in a position where they are asked to lead, or they have no choice but to lead, or they may take up a position of leadership because they are in fact in a position where they have no choice, and it doesn't always go well. You know, there is a bit of a myth that circulates online about INFJs being reluctant leaders, but if they have no choice but to lead, they will do it, and they will do it well, right? Well, I don't think that's true, and if there is any INFJ in the comment section that would like to contribute their experience of having been in a situation of reluctantly accepting a position of leadership and doing it well, I'd be curious to hear more about how they went about it. I'd like to know about what kind of mode of interaction with the world they are in. Because if in fact they are somewhere along the path of spiritualization, that would make sense, but I will return to this later. Another misconception is that the idea that INFJs are reluctant to lead or avoid positions of possible leadership because it's just an INFJ thing, you know, that INFJs don't like leading people. And, you know, people usually invoke that INFJs are too introverted for this, or they are too wrapped up in their NI world for this, and so on and so forth. Now, there is certainly a grain of truth to all these different positions, but they don't capture the whole truth. The fact of the matter is, INFJs are neither more nor less adept at leadership than people of other types, with the probable, I should say, exception of certain types that seem to be particularly fit for leading, such as ENTJs, right? The thing is, it's not so much that INFJs, it's in the nature of INFJs to not want to lead or to avoid positions of leadership at all costs. Is that to be in a position of leadership, you need to have self-confidence, right? If you don't have an ounce of self-confidence or low self-confidence, the idea of leadership is going to be, first of all, it's going to terrorize you, it's going to make you frightened, and you're going to lack in a sense, you're going to lack the drive and the proactive charisma to push that forward. And INFJs do often struggle with issues of low self-confidence. So that's one of your first clues, right? But we can go even deeper by asking, why do so many INFJs feel low in self-confidence? INFJs tend to feel low in self-confidence not because it belongs to the INFJ identity to be low in self-confidence. Now, readers of my latest book, The Infinite Soul, right, will know that I wager war in this book against what I call the restrictive interpretation of type, or to be more in line with the final vocabulary of this book, the finite conception of type. This book is called The Infinite Soul because it advocates for what I call an infinite conception of type. Now, the finite conception of type, where your type is just a list of characteristics, will tend to promote this idea that if so many INFJs are kind of low in self-confidence, avoid leadership position, that's because it belongs to the INFJ identity to be low in self-confidence or to avoid leadership position. And then that's a fixed trait and there's nothing that you can do about it, right? And we want to certainly avoid that kind of notion, because reality is just a lot more fluid. So why are so many INFJs low in self-confidence? Well, if you have read the previous book, The Ecstatic Soul, right, on the content of the INFJ mind, the way that INFJ consciousness works, what it feels like to be an INFJ, the existential manifestation, in other words, you will know that INFJ identity is deeply woven into the possession of prescience, which you could boil down to the idea of having a strong NI worldview. Now, what that suggests is that until the INFJ has allowed their NI worldview to mature, They will not be confident in that worldview. They will tend to be adaptive, submissive with other people. And they will consequently certainly lack in self-confidence, because their sense of self is very deeply interwoven with their sense of their NI worldview. Okay, you need to understand this. Self-perception, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-identity for the INFJ is deeply interwoven with their NI worldview. As long as that worldview has not matured, or as long as they're in a sense not confident in the validity of that worldview, they will not be self-confident. So in order to be in a position of leadership, you need to have developed this worldview. But more than this, you need to have developed this worldview to the extent where you have resolved what I call severance, being torn, being pulled apart between belonging by necessity in external social reality and living within the NI world. In a sense, what you could say is that an NI world which is more solipsistic, which is another mode of existence that INFJs have, that I talk about in the Infinite Soul. The NI world looks like it's complete, but actually it's not quite complete, because the final stage of completion of that NI world is its projection into external reality. That's the full sort of circle of the synthesis. When it's projected into external reality, and I know people have asked me how, people in the comments have asked me for more concrete steps towards achieving this kind of projection, and I will discuss that in future videos. It's a tough topic, but it certainly has to be addressed. Until that projection has been achieved, and that usually takes the shape of what I call prescience as vocation, concept from the ecstatic soul, right? So you really understand that the two books are very closely correlated, and that the Infinite Soul builds on the groundwork of the ecstatic soul. Until that's been achieved, and until then, your NI worldview has been articulated as a life project, as something that really has value and validity and applicability in external reality. Your NI worldview is not complete because it remains mostly just abstract. And I would argue, and that brings us to the liberated or spiritualized INFJ, who has resolved severance, who has mastered their own brand of alienation, and who is confident in, they're confident in a worldview and how to project that worldview in external reality. Well, these INFJs are actually going to find leadership quite natural. And don't forget that leadership doesn't mean that you have to be the leader of a company or the leader of a religious group, or you can also be a kind of a leader by inspiration, a leader by example, a leader by intellect, a leader by even an empathic leader. You can be a leader in many respects, but you lead the way, right? One expression I like that I use in the ecstatic soul is that you coordinate other people in a cooperative mission towards refining the insight of NI, which again connects back to this idea that NI is both the source of INFJ identity and self-esteem, but also the source of their project and what is going to aggregate people around this project, which is the INFJ brand of leadership. So in a sense, you see that the answer is subtle and difficult, it's complex. Most INFJs are not comfortable with leadership because of self-esteem, because of an undeveloped NI worldview, but there is a way to transcend that, to surpass that. It's spiritualization, guys. It's spiritualization. For more on these topics, you can get The Infinite Soul. The link is below. It's my latest book on INFJ life in the modern world, how to find meaning, purpose, and value, and spiritual leadership in a world that is often hostile to us. The link is right below. If you have loved the book but haven't reviewed it, please consider reviewing it. It helps with the referencing on Amazon, helps me ultimately. Particularly if you can't support me on Patreon, there's a link to Patreon. If you would like to support my work on a monthly basis, not a daily basis, of course, a monthly basis, it's $3.50 a month or more. You support my work, you get access to bonus content, including what I will start doing, which is more in-depth discussions of topics from my books. And you can interact with me there, suggest new content. There's a community that's growing. Thank you to my supporters. I hope you consider supporting me. The Ecstatic Soul is the one that I mentioned, my first book, a few years old, still very relevant. People are loving it. Check the reviews. Consider buying it together with the sequel, The Infinite Soul. And I'll talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.